Lady from 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to debate against the bill.
You have the floor.
This is a moment where my uncle would say to not beat a dead horse. But I come from a unique perspective because I work in the international and national tourism and industry field. I represent many corporations, and I'm very proud that the corporations and businesses that I represent are very business responsible and friendly to their not only citizens but to their employees. And I think that the challenge here that I'm seeing, and I can go on, but the challenge is that while the sponsor says this bill is in favor of cleaning up legislation, I think that instead of cleaning up legislation more towards the state, this bill should be cleaned up in favor of our citizens. I want to add that if we believe that states should have autonomy over making decisions for themselves as it relates to federal government oversight, we should apply that same logic to local cities and municipalities as they relate to state regulation, as each city and district is different. I'd also like to say that I do sympathize with the good gentleman before me who feels that this is a good bill for consistency. But I'd also like to point out, as a citizen of Plummer, and of course those of us who are residents of Genesee and my constituency from Troy, the standard is much lower than the standard here in Boise. I pay 3 times in rent than I do for my mortgage back in Plummer. An individual making $7.25 an hour has no way to pay rent for an apartment and feed himself or their family in a larger community. So I want to be real and bring us down to a point. The multiple studies that I've researched and looked at, and even how I operate in the industry, we've looked at these minimum wage increases and how this would benefit larger cities. City of Seattle, for example, Los Angeles, especially disadvantaged minorities, have all been impacted positively, and I want to step on that because the good representative from District 34 has mentioned this. And Mr. Speaker, there's a study that I'd like to reference, if you do not mind.
In the future, studies that are germane to the topic, I think are fair game, and I don't think that you need to ask the body's permission in the future. If you begin reading a long treatise, that's when it'll get on our nerves. So, go ahead, good lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just in reference, because it was mentioned on the floor today, UC Berkeley study shows that the LA minimum wage increase to $15 by 2019 would raise wages for more than 600,000 workers, 80% of which are people of color. By contrast, businesses would only see a 1% increase in operating cost. LA could lose 3,500 jobs by 2019, but that would largely be set off by the 2.5% job growth per year expected in LA over the next 3 years. So I am one who certainly understands that the population of people of color in the U.S. will certainly be greatly impacted, but in a positive way. I want to move forward because while I've looked at all the cities throughout the U.S., there are many gold standards, them being Seattle, Oklahoma City, and L.A. The effectiveness of local control is tremendous. Because the state of Oklahoma was willing to let the city manage its own economic affairs, the local option tax, for example, which allowed citizens to choose for themselves where their taxes were spent, led to business incentives and public investment that gave OKC one of the best economies of any metropolitan in the country. Oklahoma City leadership and its citizens knew best for their solution to their own local issues, and they've created a booming economy because the state allowed them the flexibility of local control. The Idaho legislature should learn from these successful examples. And we've had many of these folks come in to tell us exactly the struggles that they've had and trying to give us an example to follow to show that they don't want to see us go down that same path. And I completely understand. Fellow representatives, I'm standing up today to fight for local control and to defend not only my local communities, but all local communities throughout our state. It is a struggle because many Idahoans wish to maintain their local authority to evaluate their own wage standards and decide whether or not raising the minimum wage best meets their needs. This bill moves in opposition to growth in industry, and by removing local cities from addressing their own growth management needs, it restricts municipal freedoms to re-examine their own regulations. And I don't want to belabor the issue because I know when you talk too long on this floor, you certainly lose your audience. But Idaho already employs Dillon's rules. To me, this is a transparency issue. This is a legal principle, and it's already determined between the state and the local governments from having this positive relationship that we need. I feel this is just a bullet to promote economic growth, and we're moving in the wrong direction. So I ask you to reconsider. I'm going to be voting no, and I hope you will do the same. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 13,
Would the good lady that just
from 5.
spoke from 5, would the good lady yield to a question?
Will the lady yield to a question?
The lady yields.
The lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and good lady. I was intrigued by your debate talking about the importance of the issue of local control, and that seemed like that's where your debate, Senator, was around the issue of local control. So what if we take this down to the micro level of local control and let that local business owner, the guy that actually started the business, set the wage and get the government out of trying to tell that local business person what his wage should be through an initiative process?
Lady from 5.
Gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, and gentlemen from District 13, I completely agree with you there. And that's the point that I made in the beginning of my argument, because it's all about business responsibility, having a good relationship with your employees. And I believe that with the local citizens feel that that is not happening, they have the right to speak up. And that is the greatest point of our democracy, is when they have the right to vote and address their businesses.